Hello everybody, it's Andrew Hutchings here, and because I saw like a little recommended video on Instagram that said how vaccines work, I figured I'd tell you how vaccines work. I'm not a licensed physician, not giving medical advice. I am a scientist with a degree in Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, so in fact, I may be more knowledgeable about this than many doctors, because you could go to school for dance and go to medical school and work as a doctor. You don't need to be a scientist and an expert on molecules. So, long story short, with COVID vaccines, and I don't keep up to date with them at like 100% because I just got tired of all this stuff, this nonsense. But the popular ones, like the Moderna one, they call it the mRNA vaccine or the RNA vaccine, whatever maybe you've heard it called. Then you've probably heard of the DNA vaccine, but it's not actually a DNA vaccine, it's an actual virus. But the thing is, the virus has DNA inside of it. And then what is the least common, and I think only used in some third world, I really don't know where they use it. Doesn't mean it's horrible, though. Or vaccines that just directly inject the spike protein or another protein into your body. But whether it's an mRNA vaccine, a DNA vaccine, which is actually just a non-replicative virus, a virus that has the genetic code that codes for the parts that it needs to replicate. It has that removed, so you put it in, and it can do its stuff, but it's not going to keep replicating and replicating. I don't know if they've done this with COVID ones, but with like flu vaccines, I think they've genetically altered them so that they don't work, but the viruses don't work as well as in certain temperatures as other temperatures. That way you won't get like respiratory infections due to the temperature change between like your lungs and other cells in your body. But COVID's a thing that's popular right now, so I'm talking about COVID. The mRNA vaccines are kind of basically like a synthetic virus, more so than an actual synthetic virus. I wouldn't call the DNA vaccines synthetic viruses. I would call them genetically engineered viruses made to not be able to replicate, whereas I would call the mRNA vaccine a synthetic virus. It is different, has a different design, it's very different. Instead of being surrounded by proteins, which make a sphere, it's surrounded by lipids. Those lipids allow it to pass through cell membranes and such, or not all of them, but allows it to get into the body. A little battery. Being encapsulated in those lipids allows it to get into the body, release the mRNA. Your ribosomes are these like reader thingies that the RNA goes through it and it reads out the code and prints out a protein, one amino acid at a time, until you get a protein, the spike protein. Whether it's an mRNA vaccine that introduces the mRNA with the like synthetic virus lipid sphere that's around it, or whether it's a genetically modified virus not be able to replicate, which has proteins surrounding it with perhaps different cell surface receptors, that way it can bind to the cells and they actually pull it in themselves rather than it just passing through them. But those ones also, well, they have DNA, but the DNA gets turned into RNA, then the RNA goes through the ribosome, it prints out one amino acid at a time until you have the protein, the spike protein. Or remember, I said there are some vaccines where they just directly inject the spike protein. This spike protein then triggers your adaptive immune response. parts in your body break down proteins into little fragments. Those little fragments get presented on the surface of certain cells. Then you get T cells, which maybe, I don't know if you know what T cells are, but they're part of the immune system. They're like your immune system cells, yeah. I don't know how else to put it simply. So you've got those broken down proteins that are on little pieces of them are on the surface of cells. You get the T cells coming, they bind to that, and the other stuff binds. And basically it allows the T cells to be able to recognize what it just bound to in the future. They can replicate, do some other stuff so that you have more cells that can then bind to that piece of the protein that was presented. But you've got to keep in mind that it's not just this one little piece. The protein was broken down in a ton of different places. Lots of different pieces of it are presented. You get lots of different cells coming into contact with them and doing other stuff with other cells. And then you end up with an army that can like hone in on that sequence of amino acids or protein. The chopped up protein. That is your adaptive immune response. So regardless of whether you get the Moderna vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, which I think they work the same, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, the whatever vaccine, at the end of the day, they all make spike proteins in your body, or they get it into your body somehow. And then they are chopped up, pieces of them are presented, and your body creates an army that can recognize those pieces and destroy the invaders.